there is a piece of information that everyone around you possesses about you, but to which you, specifically, will never have direct access. The way your behavior is perceived by the person on the other side of the conversation. You have access to your own intentions, what you meant to say, the affection behind a comment, the urgency behind an interruption. But the actual impact of those actions, the micro-expression that formed on the other person's face, the silence that lingered a second too long, passes you by every day, unregistered. And it's not because you aren't paying attention, it's because your brain literally wasn't built to process that information in real time while you're busy being the person speaking and navigating the social scene. This phenomenon has a name and a mechanism. It explains why practically no one can identify their own social blunders on their own. Not me, not you, not even the most socially attuned person you know. This video isn't about showing you a list of annoying behaviors just to make you feel bad. It's about showing you why these behaviors exist in every human brain, including yours, and why the solution was never simply to pay more attention, because attention isn't the problem. The problem is structural, and it is both simpler and more unsettling than it seems. To understand the mechanism, it helps to consider a much simpler, more physical limitation, one everyone has experienced without ever stopping to think about it. You have never seen your own face, not your real face, live in motion, reacting to things, but rather reflections, photos, and videos. Always a delayed, edited version of yourself. Meanwhile, you have spent your entire life seeing others' faces in real time, picking up on every micro-expression, every furrow of the brow, every smile that didn't reach the eyes. This isn't a coincidence, it's architecture. The brain was designed as an outward-facing information processor because, from an evolutionary standpoint, survival depended on reading the environment and other people, not on auditing one's own behavior in real time. And that very architecture, which works perfectly well to keep you alive, is exactly what blinds you to your own social performance. While you're in a conversation, your brain uses up virtually all its available processing power crafting the next sentence, gauging the right tone, deciding what to share, and managing your own anxiety. There is no computational capacity left to simultaneously run an honest audit of the impact you're having. Doing both things well at the same time is simply too demanding physically. That's why the asymmetry is so stark. You can spot, with almost automatic ease, when someone else is being boring, intrusive, or self-centered in a conversation. Yet that same clarity of perception simply doesn't apply to you. To notice those traits in yourself, you would have to step outside your own experience and observe it from the outside in real time, which is practically a cognitive contradiction. And here lies the most uncomfortable part of the story. The signals that you are being boring, intrusive, or unpleasant are neither rare nor subtle. They are constantly being broadcast by the people around you through silences, changes of subject, and gazes that look away a split second sooner than usual. However, these signals reach you filtered through a system that wasn't optimized to protect you from your own self-image. It was optimized to keep you functioning within the scene. And that is precisely why the following list should not be read as a collection of character flaws. It is a list of structural blind spots, behaviors that virtually any human brain can generate without warning, because the system meant to issue the alert is, by design, looking outward rather than inward. I'm going to tell you right now about the signals your brain automatically filters out. The first of these blind spots appears exactly where the brain is most preoccupied with itself, when telling a story. There is a type of person who, while someone else is speaking, feels an almost physical need to interrupt to share their own version, a similar experience of their own, or an anecdote that is even crazier than that one. The reason for this isn't pure vanity, as it often appears from the outside. Rather, while the other person is speaking, this person's brain is no longer fully processing the other's content. Instead, it is busy organizing the narrative they want to tell next, waiting for the first gap in the conversation to jump in. All the processing power that should be directed toward listening is, in practice, turned inward, cataloging their own story. And that is precisely why such a person never notices, in real time, the other person's face tightening slightly after being interrupted for the third time in the same conversation. Their attention simply isn't available to pick up on that cue. The second blind spot is even more silent because it doesn't rely on speech, but on reading cues. There are people who persist with a certain approach, topic, or level of closeness, even after the other person has signaled, in various nonverbal ways, that it isn't welcome. Here, the explanation isn't a lack of emotional sensitivity, but a lack of real-time feedback calibration. To pick up on a subtle sign of discomfort, the brain would need to run two processes simultaneously with equal priority, generating the next action and monitoring the reaction provoked by the previous one. In practice, hardly anyone manages to do this well when nervous, excited, or emotionally invested in the interaction, because the anxiety of the moment consumes the very processing capacity needed to notice the signal. In other words, the person isn't ignoring the signal out of arrogance. They literally aren't processing the signal because all their cognitive energy is turned inward, focused on managing their own performance. The third blind spot is perhaps the most counterintuitive of all, because it stems from a comparison. The brain is structurally incapable of making on its own, comparing one's own intensity level with the intensity considered normal by an outsider. This manifests in people who stand physically too close, speak too loudly, touch too much, or simply take up more emotional space in a conversation than the actual relationship warrants. The reason is simple to grasp when viewed this way. You only have access to your own intention, never to the impact as perceived from the outside. You know that touch was affectionate, that the proximity was genuine, and that there were no ulterior motives, but that internal certainty isn't the same data the other person is receiving, because they don't have access to your intention, only to the effect. And without a constant external mirror, this kind of intensity calibration never self-corrects, because there is no objective scale of comparison within the brain itself. And the fourth blind spot, perhaps the trickiest of all, as it often masquerades as friendliness, is an excessive need for approval. That tendency to overpraise, overvalidate, or automatically belittle oneself in the presence of someone one admires. Here, the underlying mechanism isn't a failure to read social cues. It's the opposite. It's a brain reading the social situation so intensely, and with such anxiety, that it prioritizes the immediate reduction of its own discomfort, the fleeting certainty of being accepted, over an accurate reading of how that behavior is being received by the other person. It's a trade-off the brain makes without consulting anyone. Immediate relief from one's own insecurity at the cost of accurately gauging the actual impact being made. 4 different blind spots, 4 different mechanisms, yet all sharing the same root. In none of these cases is there any ill intent. There is a brain that, when it comes time to act, spends practically all its available energy looking inward, precisely at the moment it should be looking outward. I'm going to show you the turning point now. How to hack your own blind spot. This is where most people get the solution wrong, because the natural reaction after understanding all this is to think, so, I just need to pay more attention. But that conclusion overlooks exactly what we just established. If the problem were a lack of conscious effort, it would have been solved long ago, since no one wants to come across as annoying, intrusive, or needy. The problem isn't motivational. It's structural. Asking someone to pay more attention to themselves during an interaction is like asking them to run 2 competing processes at maximum priority simultaneously. In practice, this almost never happens consistently because it demands an amount of cognitive energy that simply isn't available in the heat of the moment. If the system is blind to itself by design, the solution cannot originate from within that system. It has to come from the outside. This completely changes where one should focus their effort. Instead of trying to self-monitor in real time, the most efficient path is to build external correction mechanisms. Mechanisms that work precisely because they don't require split attention while the action is taking place. The first of these is the most obvious, yet the most avoided. Asking for direct feedback from someone close enough to be honest, yet with no vested interest in simply pleasing you. It shouldn't be a generic question like, "Was I acting weird yesterday?" but rather a specific question about a specific moment, because the other person's brain, observing from the outside, had access to the exact data yours missed. The second mechanism is cultivating the habit of observing concrete reactions instead of assuming intentions, replacing the thought, "I know I wasn't being intrusive," with, "What specifically did the other person's face or body do right after I did that?" And the third, perhaps the most underrated, is retrospective review, mentally revisiting an interaction that has already concluded, once the anxiety of the moment is no longer consuming one's processing capacity, and re-examining what actually happened there with greater objectivity. I myself had to develop this habit over the years, not because I simply decided one day to be more self-aware, but because I learned, one way or another, that without an external mirror, my own judgment of myself will always have a blind spot I cannot see from the inside. And perhaps this is the most important turning point of all. The problem was never a lack of character. It was the lack of a mirror that the brain itself is incapable of creating on its own. This completely changes the judgments we tend to make, both about others and ourselves, because it is easy to look at someone who is annoying, intrusive, or needy for validation and conclude that they are a worse, less evolved, or less capable person. But what is actually there, most of the time, is simply a brain operating exactly like everyone else's, lacking access to information that was never clearly provided to it. And this applies to me just as much as it does to you. I have blind spots I still don't see, and I only discover them when someone I trust has the courage to point one out to me. The real difference between the person others avoid and the person others seek out has never been social perfection. It has been the willingness to accept an external mirror, even when it reveals something uncomfortable. So, before you close this video and go about your day, it is far more valuable to honestly ask yourself which of these blind spots might be playing out within you right now, without any warning, rather than judging someone you know who displays these signs.